Hello everyone, welcome back to this Voiceflow tutorial. In this video we're going to be adding some conversation history or context to our flow. Right, so far these questions that we asked the chatbot, it's able to answer, and that is the end of that thought. Right, so if you ask another question, it is not able to reference the answer that it gave in the previous question iteration, right? So we want to give this chatbot the ability to be able to see the previous conversation history. So how do we plan to do that? We can basically create another component, right? And we will place that component here at this portion of the flow. Now that component is going to take in the RAG answer, and it's also going to take in the question, the original question the user posed. Now that RAG answer, before we do anything with it, we need to summarize that RAG answer, because I noticed that the answers are pretty long sometimes. So in order to make it, more modularized and not, blowed up too quickly, we can summarize the RAG answer. Basically, you can decide not to if you want. That's also fine, right? So I summarize the RAG answer and then take the question and then equate both of them to a variable, right? So that variable is what we will basically, set within the component we're going to put here. Now after that, we can then come here to this portion of the flow, and then after the question has been entered by the user, we can then use a condition step here, right? Or use a condition using, like, not necessarily a condition step, but a condition step using a prompt. Basically, we'll see how that works very soon, right? And then we would ask a question. If the question that the user has posed is something that requires previous conversation history, right, then it should basically ignore this path, right, and then follow the basically use the conversation history that we have already been able to capture here, right, and then we can use that conversation history to answer the user's question, right? And if the question is something that, the conversation history cannot help with, then we move into the RAG component. So I think that's basically the explanation of everything we are going to accomplish in this video. So now let's begin. So the first thing is let's drag our component to the canvas. Okay. So now let's create a new component. So this, we can just come here and call this conversation context, something like that, right? So we can create and then we can edit this. Good. So the first thing that we need to do here is, we know that we want to take in the RAG answer and then the original question. So what we need to do initially is to summarize the RAG answer. So we can do a set step, right? So we can basically use a prompt, and then we need to generate a new prompt. Now that new prompt, what should it be? I can get that for you. Minute. So here is the system prompt. So we can just paste this here. Oh, sorry. think I didn't copy that properly. Good. So it says your helpful assistant tasked with summarizing answers generated by an AI based on retrieved documents, blah 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 blah. That's one. Then you have the user. We can say the original question was, and then we can come here and use the question variable. You can decide to use the rephrased question if you want, but the question number one reflects exactly what the user said, and also is usually shorter, right? So then the next thing you can say is the answer provided was. So you can just see this is RAG answer. Good. And then we can then say, please summarize this answer in a clear and concise way. So now that we've done this, we can also change this to say RAG answer summarize something, right? Then we can just close this. Let me reload this. Good. So before we proceed, I didn't set this to a variable, so we can set this now to a variable. Let's create one and call it summarized RAG answer, right? So we can just hit create, and yeah, we have our variable. Now, so the next thing we want to do is that we want to basically take the summarized answer. We want to take the original question as well, and then we will basically join them together or concatenate them together, right? The way we will do that is using JavaScript, right? So we can just drag our JavaScript block to the canvas. Okay, so now we can come here into the JavaScript, and then we already have all these variables, all the variables we need, so we don't need to create anything new within JavaScript. So we can just simply say, okay, yeah, we might need to create something new actually, right? So we will need to create a new variable called, maybe we can call it conversation context, right? But we won't create it in this JavaScript file because it wouldn't reflect here if we create it within the file. So what we will do is that we will basically create a variable called, where's the set step here? No, the set step. So we'll create a variable called conversation context. So just create a variable, call it conversation context. Then we create the variable. We don't set it to anything, and then we can delete this. So the reason we've done this is so that Voiceflow has that variable in the backend, right? So we can just delete this. So the next thing we will do now is to create our JavaScript step, our JavaScript within the JavaScript step, right? So I've already added some code here for us. So what is happening here is that we take in the conversation context, right? And then we say, okay, question colon equals the question variable, right? Which is the question that the user posed, and then move to the next line. That is, move to the next line, and then answer colon the summarized RAG answer, that we've summarized just now, right? So the next thing we should do here is to just add extra new line characters. So it would separate each new conversation context will be separated by a new line character, right? So that's about that, right? So we can just simply connect this here, right? So now the variable that we will be extracting from this component will just be the conversation context, right? So when you enter here, we should have this connected like this. So this is our simple component. Now we can return to our original flow. I don't know what's going on. Okay, let me try to go to the dashboard, and then can't find the button to go back. Okay, so here, good. So this is our conversation context. Now we can just simply come here and delete this. Let me reload. So I can drag my conversation context here. So that's one. Then the other thing that needs to happen is, okay, we just need to drag this here, right? Good. So once the question has been answered, the answer is added to our conversation context, and then would you like to ask another question, and then it goes back, and then you can ask your question, and the conversation context keeps getting updated, right? So one thing we can do here is to also print out the conversation context so we can see exactly what is happening, right? So let's drag a message step. Can we drag something underneath here? Yes, we can. So we can say something like, okay. So we can come here and edit this message and say something like the latest, or the conversation history is given below, right? And then we can then come here and put in conversation context, right? So yeah, we can then, join this to this, and yeah, we should be able to see the history of the conversation as we ask more questions. So let's run the flow. So the first question that we should ask is this, sorry. How much is the tuition for international undergraduate students at BFU, right? So that's the first one. Okay. So do we want to ask another question? Yes. So the question we would ask this time would be, let's say, is there a language support center for non-native English speakers? So yeah, we have now run the basically two cycles. Now you can see here the conversation history is given below, the first question and then the answer, right? And then you have the second question and then the answer. So that's basically it. So you can tell now that it is updating the conversation context accordingly. So yeah, that's about that for now. In the next video, we will try to implement the second part of what I explained, which was to check whether or not the question requires using the conversation context or our RAG system. Thank you very much for watching. I hope the videos have been helpful. Enjoy the rest of your day.